Okay, we are continuing with the book here, The Holy Grail of Wisdom Quotes by me, Pete Rogers. And we're going in alphabetical order, so now we're on Lord Kelvin. Okay, he's the guy who has the Kelvin temperatures. He was a contemporary of Friedrich Nietzsche, and we're going to come back to that in a moment. He was born in Ireland, so he's an Irishman. He later went to Glasgow University in Scotland, their great scholarly place, Scotland. He was a prodigy. He was a Scots-Irish scientist. A lot of smart Scots-Irish people. He developed the Kelvin temperature scale. He's buried in Westminster Abbey next to Newton. And that's one thing, Westminster Abbey has a lot of great scientists and scholars there. But here's some of his quotes, and you're going to see there's something funny about this. In science, there is only physics. The rest is stamp collecting. Once again, we see whatever somebody does for a living, they always think that's the best thing and the most important thing. He says, I often say that when you can measure what you are speaking about and express it in numbers, then you know something about it. But if you cannot measure it and you cannot express it in numbers, your knowledge is of a meager, unsatisfactory kind. To measure is to know. Can you measure it? Can you express it in numbers? If not, then your theory is apt to be based more upon imagination than upon knowledge. If you cannot measure it, you cannot improve it. There is nothing new to be discovered in physics now. All that remains is more precise measurement. Okay, so that's Lord Kelvin, okay, and I want to just share with you why that's funny. I'm going to let you hear the criticism of this type of talking by Friedrich Nietzsche. So Friedrich Nietzsche says, a scientific interpretation of the world as you understand might still be one of the most stupid of all possible interpretations of the world, meaning that it would be one of the poorest in meaning. This thought is intended for the ears and the consciences of our mechanists who nowadays like to pass as philosophers and insist that materialism is a doctrine of the first and last laws on which all existence must be based as the ground floor. But essentially, a mechanical world would be an essentially meaningless world. Assuming that one estimated the value of a piece of music according to how much it could be counted, calculated, and expressed in numbers and formulas, how absurd would such a scientific estimation of music be? What would one have comprehended, understood, or grasped of music? Nothing, really nothing of what music is could be explained by that. So that's Friedrich Nietzsche. And that's an excellent comeback. So yeah, there's lots of things you can't express in numbers. And Carl Jung had said something like that as well. Myth and psychology, they can go way beyond what you can do with numbers. And I would also say, look at this, he says, an essentially mechanical world would be essentially a meaningless world. And I would also say an atheistic world is a meaningless world. And Nietzsche proposed atheism, okay? But the reason for that is Nietzsche was a homosexual. And that's why he sort of felt that Christianity was against homosexuality in some way. Christians don't care about homosexuals. They don't celebrate it, but they don't have anything against it. If somebody wants to be a homo, okay? What do I care, okay? But anyways, that's Nietzsche, and that's partly why he was pre-Socratic. A lot of guys who are homosexuals think the Greeks were more homo than they were, and Oscar Wilde was like that too, okay? Anyways, here's another quote of Lord Kelvin. He says, to have a flying machine that is heavier than air is impossible. He said this publicly, famously, and that's funny again because pretty soon after that, the Wright brothers at Kitty Hawk were flying an airplane. Okay? And think about it. A bird's heavier than air or more dense than air. Stupid. So a genius, sometimes they get out of their field, they're pretty stupid. Okay. But, Kelvin did some good things. Obviously, he was great in his own field, and he said some good things. So let's give him a chance here. He says, to live amongst friends is the primary essential of happiness. Yeah, it's nice to be around friends. When you're around friends, you got common ground. You can talk to them. Okay. As soon as I hear somebody from anywhere in the world singing Christian songs, I know I have a lot in common with them, and that's a good thing. Okay. He says there is nothing in science that teaches the origin of anything at all. Overwhelmingly strong proofs of intelligent and benevolent design are all around us. An atheistic idea is so nonsensical I cannot put it into words. If you study science deep enough and long enough, it will force you to believe in God. And that's true. When you talk to people who really know a lot of science and how off the charts complex it is, that the greatest human minds devoting 50 years can only understand a tiny part of it, then you realize it had to come from a mind, many orders of magnitude beyond us. Okay, Harry Kelvin, a writer, he said, grades in school usually reward the most docile students, those who conform to the teacher's opinions. There is nothing competitive about learning. It is something one does on their own. Yeah, school, this idea that teaching is the source of learning. Teaching encourages the student, but in the public schools, people don't learn anything, practically, except how to be a conformist, obedient, future slave. Okay, cynicism is disappointed idealism. That's a good one, because sometimes a person's all cynical, but they just need a little encouragement. In this life, you sometimes have to choose between pleasing God and pleasing man. In the long run, it's better to please God. He's more likely to remember. Okay, next we'll do Thomas Kempis. Well, Thomas Kempis was a very religious guy. And we just have a couple things from him. Sitting apart in a nook with a book, I kind of like that. Habit is overcome by new habit. You got to do it for a while till it'll stick with you. We must imitate Christ's life and his ways if we are to be truly enlightened and to set free from the darkness of our own hearts. Let it be the most important thing we do then to reflect on the life of Jesus Christ. Okay, love makes everything that is heavy light. Yeah, if you love somebody, it's easy to do right from. Okay, the cross is our protection against our enemies, and that's true too. That's what a lot of Christians don't understand. You have to think of a country as being like a train robbery. Okay, and the robbers are the ones who run it. All right, if all the passengers are diverse and they're not unified in their opinion and their behavior, or in Christianity and what is right and what is wrong, and they don't stick together, then they're easy victims for the train robbers, because the train robbers know they'll stick together. But if the people on the train were to stick together and say, right is right, I will stand up for each other, then the train robbers couldn't do anything because they vastly outnumber them. Okay? So what does that mean? Well, what it means is the cross, the Bible says man is created in the image of God, therefore they're all part divine, therefore they all deserve to be treated as something special, as humans, that is something special beyond all the animals. But once you go to atheistic Darwinism, it says all humans are just talking monkeys and therefore have no rights, and then they're owned by the ruler. And therefore he can do whatever he wants to them. Okay? He can take your daughter away and have fun with her in the sack. He can force you to be a slave. He can just take your kidneys and let you die. He can do whatever he wants to you because you're just a farm animal. That's how farmers treat their dairy cattle. And atheistic Darwinism says the ruler has the right to treat his people that way. And if you don't think that's the case, then you really haven't studied very much. Okay? All right, so Thomas Kempis goes a lot with more of that sort of stuff. And he's nice. We're going to do now the highlight of the day. We're going to talk about this guy. This is Wilmore Kendall. Wilmore Kendall was this kind of eccentric genius through the mid-1900s. Here he is smoking a cigarette, teaching some students. He's one of the co-founders of the National Review with William Buckley. He was a professor at Yale, and William F. Buckley was one of his proteges. Okay, Wilmore Kendall lived from 1909 to 1967. The way I became interested in him was he had a very unique teaching style and writing style. He was super popular as a teacher. Students loved him. Wherever he would lecture, all the students wanted to go to his lecture. And he's from Oklahoma, and he's got this interesting writing style. It's sort of a Oklahoma Sooner kind of folksy. Just to give you a sense of how smart this guy is, he graduated high school at 13 years of age. And high school was a lot more difficult in those days. He graduated college at 18 years of age. He was a Rhodes Scholar. He later became a professor of political science at Yale. That's where he met William F. Buckley. He eventually converted to Catholicism. When he was young, he kind of experimented with different things, socialism, this and that. But when he saw what happened in the Spanish Civil War and how evil the communists were in the Spanish Civil War, basically, killing the priests, raping the nuns, etc., burning down the churches, he's like, these guys are assholes. Okay, in early youth, let's see. He later came to believe the key for the USA was that the people should have more say, that the Constitution was far more important than the Declaration of Independence. And he sort of had said something along the lines of, I'd rather be ruled by, the first 200 people in the phone book than a bunch of poli-sci professors or politicians. And what he meant by that, he thought the American people had common sense. He was featured in a book, a biography sort of book, by William F. Buckley called Red Hunter. That came out in 1999. He wrote a bunch of books too, and there were collections of his essays. I became interested in him because I saw how he wrote, and he had a great writing style, which I'm sure mimicked his teaching style. It was playful, Socratic. I want to be a great teacher too, so I want to learn from a guy who was a magnificent teacher. It was very idiomatic, a lot of rhetoric. His father had a Miltonic style of talking. He was a blind preacher, was his father, like Milton, okay? In class, he would stride around, he'd point at the students in a funny way, and it was like he put them in a spell in his seminars. He was famous for having absolutely great lectures and whatnot. He spoke ad lib, on his own authority, alternating between urbane academic diction and rural Oklahoma idiom, okay? He was just a great classroom teacher. He would make up nicknames for his competitors, and that's an effective thing to do. It sort of crystallizes their key point. It's like a verbal caricature of them. He was sort of a Midwest guy, if you will, okay? He was called the prophet of the heartland. All right. He's described as a Christian Aristotelian, sort of a modern Abelard. He was always smoking. He is an idiot about health. He didn't know any better. Some of the things that he was sort of famous for saying, he felt that Truman had sold Poland into slavery at Yalta, and that is true. Okay, that was very wrong. USA betrayed Eastern Europe after World War II. They could have done a lot more to protect those countries from Eastern Europe. That was bad. He supported McCarthy in a big way, even when others abandoned him. McCarthy had a point. USA had let China go to communism. They could have supported Chiang Kai-shek. He told the truth about that. Okay? When you tell the truth in the real world, you often get in trouble for it. He gave a lot of intellectual reasons why we should have supported McCarthy more. He wanted to deport the communists. Okay? He felt they were destroying the United States. And he seems to have been partially blacklisted from history. I couldn't find a single video about him on YouTube. He's not on the quote pages. He's been sort of, despite the fact being super hyper eloquent and brilliant, he's not on the quote pages. So this is sort of what happens when a true genius comes along and tries to do good for America. He gets blacklisted from history. Okay, and that'll probably be my fate someday, so I can relate to that. He also felt that Roosevelt had betrayed China to Mao. Okay, and he's right about that. Okay. He was glad Alger Hiss, the spy, got caught. Again, his dad was a blind Methodist preacher, and his son said he was like Milton. That's great. He wanted to be like Edmund Burke, the great Irish speaker. I got to like that. Okay. In 1970, there was a posthumous publication of his essays with George Carey about basic symbols of the American political tradition. Another famous book of him was Wilmore Kendall, Contra Mundum, Against the World. Okay. And a lot of times he's writing essays rather than books. That's another reason why he's not as well known. Let me get to some of his good stuff. I want you to see his writing style. Okay, so here's an example of his writing style when he's comparing the Declaration of Independence with the Constitution. Okay? And he says, the roots of the American political tradition, so we are told, anyhow, by the official custodians of our national lore, lie in two great documents, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. The two documents were, as you know, written within a few brief but of course crowded, years of one another, and by representatives of one and the same people, that is, of we, or watching our grammar, us, the people of the United States. Okay, one of the things I want to mention to you in terms of writing style, these are called the positives. When you give a little more information, it can reflect back on the subject, and it's just throwing a little more detail into a sentence, throwing a little more detail into a sentence, okay? All right, let's continue. And that being the case, we have always liked to tell ourselves that we, the people of the United States, that the two documents say more or less the same thing, as having been written so close together by our representatives. Why shouldn't they? And yet, it gives me no pleasure to point out, and yet, the most casual look at the two documents reveals that on one important point, they do not say the same thing at all. Or, if you like, that on one important point, one of the two documents is eloquent and emphatic. The other, if I may put it so, is tight-lipped and uncommunicative. Concretely, the Declaration of Independence puts forth as one of the truths we people hold as self-evident the proposition that all men are created equal. It puts that proposition forward, indeed, as the very first of the truths we hold, and seems therefore to put it forward as the truth, along with the truth about certain natural rights that is to be planted at the very heart of the American political experience. Not, I hasten to add, that anyone appears to have been very clear as to what it meant to declare that all men were created equal. No doubt the words, even at the moment they were uttered, meant different things to different persons, even to different persons among those immediately concerned. To some, the words no doubt meant merely that all men are created equal in the eyes of God. To some, they no doubt meant merely that all men were created with an equal claim to justice under the existing law. For some, they no doubt expressed the hope, though merely the hope, that the republic about to be formed would be that land, the first land of all lands, ever and anywhere, in which men would become equal. That is, achieve the equality of which humble and disadvantaged men have often dreamt dreams that other men have called utopian. To some, the words would no doubt have meant merely the hope that America would be a land in which men would be, anyhow, more equal than elsewhere, a land in which inequalities amongst men would be less glaring, less intimately related to what we fashionably call the accident of birth, less likely to be handed down to, say, the third and the fourth generations. So anyways, that's Wilmore Kendall, and you can see he's got that folksy style with all these appositives and these so-called, you can call them emphatic statements thrown in there that makes it more folksy, more conversational. And those statements just have a little bit of emotional meaning in the sense of connecting with the audience. They don't have much factual meaning, but they sort of put you at ease. They show you like this is a friend talking to you. They give you time to think and process the sentence that just came before. So I think it's an interesting style. And that's why I wanted to give you some exposure to him. Because if you're interested in being a writer, it's well worth your time to read Wilmore Kendall. If you're interested in politics, I mean, the guy was a genius and he studied all of these documents backwards and forwards, upside down, and taught lectures on them. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, you could pursue it for that purpose as well. But he truly was a brilliant guy. Okay. Anyways, that's Wilmore Kendall.